the location of King David's final resting place, an enigma that has captivated historians, pilgrims, and scholars for centuries, a story of changing landscapes, fading memories, and the enduring power of tradition. Today, the site traditionally venerated as the tomb of King David is a synagogue, which was once a mosque, and before that, a church. It is located on the current Mount Zion, just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. For centuries, Jews, Christians, and Muslims have come here to pray, to connect with the figure of David. But there's a problem. The biblical, historical, and archaeological evidence points to another location, the ancient city of David. In antiquity, the location of the royal tombs was not a secret. They were revered landmarks etched in the collective memory of the people. Originally, Zion referred to the city of David, the fortified eastern ridge of ancient Jerusalem, and the biblical texts are clear. David was buried there. Even after the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, the tombs endured. Nehemiah mentions them when rebuilding the walls. Rabbi Akiva locates them near the Kidron Valley in the 2nd century of the Common Era. But then, something changed. Towards the end of the Second Temple period, the notion of Mount Zion began to shift. It moved westward to the hill where Herod the Great and the Jerusalem elite built their luxurious palaces. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus seems to have been the first to codify this change. He described the western hill as the citadel of David. Josephus mentions David's tomb, but does not specify its location. His accounts mix history and legend, adapted for a Roman audience. While the western hill gained prominence, the ancient city of David was losing importance. Wars, sieges, erased living memory, and Josephus's accounts reconfigured the geography of Jerusalem. At some point, after the 2nd century CE, the precise location of the royal tombs vanished. By the Byzantine era, Mount Zion had definitively moved to the western hill. And there, next to the Hagia Sion church, a symbolic cenotaph of David emerged. In the 12th century, the Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela told an incredible story. Workers repairing a church on Mount Zion discovered a cave filled with treasures, the tomb of David and the kings of Judah. But then the site was sealed and hidden, remaining so to this day, or so the legend claims. No earlier source mentions this finding, but the story ignited the medieval imagination. The Crusaders appropriated the narrative. They built a large cenotaph, dressed it in velvet and myth, and legend became fact. Today, that cenotaph on Mount Zion remains a place of prayer and paradox, a testament to our desire to connect with the past, even when it eludes us. Something similar happened with the citadel near the Jaffa Gate, the now so-called Citadel of David, or Tower of David, built by Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE. It was designed to be the northwest defense of the city, with its 3 towers, Hippicus, Phasael, and Mariamne, over earlier fortifications. But time caused Herod's legacy to be forgotten. In the Byzantine era, biblical narratives were superimposed on the ruins. The pilgrim of Piacenza referred to the Tower of David near the Jaffa Gate. This association deepened under Islamic rule, when Muslim rulers called it Mihrab Dawood, David's prayer niche. By the time of the Crusaders, it was called Tower of David, identifying the Herodian Phasael Tower as David's fortress, making it the palace of the Crusader kings. Over the centuries, the memory of the Phasael Tower faded, and its title was transferred to a 17th century Ottoman minaret. Today, this minaret overshadows its predecessor, embodying how narratives adapt to architectures. The citadel's layered identity reflects the history of Jerusalem, where tradition often prevails over historical accuracy. Many of the sites that tourists and pilgrims visit today in the Holy Land are based on tradition. The Bible often mentions regions, mountains, and cities without providing exact locations for specific places within them. For example, it speaks of the Mount of Olives, but it doesn't specify further where on the Mount of Olives. The destructions of Jerusalem in 70 and 135 CE, along with the enslavement and exile of its inhabitants, resulted in almost no local population remaining who remembered where certain events occurred. However, Some passages are more explicit about locations, and, together with advances in archaeology, they allow us to identify an increasing number of precise places where events took place. But in the case of King David's tomb, we have quite specific information directly from the Bible.
So David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David.
But the key lies in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, upon returning from the Babylonian exile in the mid-5th century BCE, initiated the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls by organizing several teams of workers. He divided the work among 41 teams, each responsible for a specific section of the wall. And the references he used to delimit each team's work are crucial.
But the gate of the fountain repaired Shallun, the son of Colhose, the ruler of part of Mizpah. He built it, and covered it, and set up the doors thereof, the locks thereof, and the bars thereof, and the wall of the pool of Siloah by the king's garden, and unto the stairs that go down from the city of David. After him repaired Nehemiah, the son of Azbuk, the ruler of the half part of Bethzur, unto the place over against the sepulchres of David, and to the pool that was made, and unto the house of the mighty.
The fountain gate, the pool of Siloam, the king's gardens. These were known locations in ancient Jerusalem, and Nehemiah places David's tombs very close to these landmarks at the southern end of the city. Centuries later, the Tosefta, a compilation of Jewish oral law, confirms this location.
The sages asked him, were not the graves of the house of David and that of Huldah the prophetess located in Jerusalem, and no one ever touched them? He replied, those cases prove nothing. There was a tunnel there through which the impurity was removed to the Kidron Valley.
The Kidron Valley does not border the current Mount Zion. The latter lies between the Tyropoion Valley and the Valley of Ben Hinnom. The Tosefta, Rabbi Akiva, confirmed that, at least until the 2nd century CE, the location of the royal tombs next to the Kidron was common knowledge. Some believe it was the destruction of the tombs of Solomon and David that triggered the Bar Kokhba revolt. This is thought to have occurred at the start of construction on the new city of Aelia Capitolina over the ruins of Jerusalem by order of Emperor Hadrian in 132 CE. This revolt, which granted the Jews 2 years of independence from Rome, came at a devastating cost: the death of over 580,000 Jewish men and their subsequent prohibition from entering the city. Cassius Dio, writing in the 2nd century, recounts the following.
Thus nearly the whole of Judea was made desolate, a result of which the people had had forewarning before the war. For the tomb of Solomon, which the Jews regard as an object of veneration, fell to pieces of itself and collapsed.
So how do we reconcile the tradition of Mount Zion with the biblical and archaeological evidence that points to the city of David? A key might lie in the practice of secondary burial. In ancient Israel, it was common to let the body decompose and then collect the bones. These bones were placed in an ossuary or reburied in a nearby location. Let's remember the inscription of King Uzziah. It's possible that at some point someone decided to act on the words of the prophet Ezekiel. Were the bones of the kings of Judah moved out of the city, thus fulfilling the prophecy? We have another historical example, the city of Tiberias, founded as a pagan city over an ancient Jewish cemetery. The Talmud relates how Shimon Bar Yochai, a disciple of Rabbi Akiva, purified Tiberias. The remains were exhumed and reinterred elsewhere. This purification allowed the Sanhedrin to move to Tiberias, establishing it as a center of Jewish learning. In the late 1960s, archaeologist Benjamin Mazar made an intriguing discovery on the western slope of Jerusalem. Along the Tyropoion Valley, he found square shafts carved into the rock, leading to large plastered underground chambers. Mazar and his colleague, Eilat Mazar, suggested that these were Phoenician-style tombs used by the Jerusalem elite. They proposed that these tombs were emptied and abandoned when King Hezekiah expanded the city in the 8th century BCE. But again, Rabbi Akiva's text in the Tosefta indicates that the tombs were not relocated at least until the 3rd century CE. The The history of archaeology in the Holy Land is a story of transformation, from destruction to science. For millennia, sacred sites were looted, invading armies, treasure hunters, all seeking riches, relics, without regard for history. In the Middle Ages, crusaders scoured the land, driven by faith and greed. These early excavations were acts of conquest, not investigation. They left scars, historical gaps. But everything changed with Napoleon. His Egyptian campaign in 1798 brought with it scholars like Jean-François Champollion. The foundations were laid for a new approach: historical research, not simple looting. In the early 19th century, explorers like Edward Robinson mapped biblical sites with the Bible in hand. Figures like William Flinders Petrie and Charles Warren revolutionized archaeology. They introduced stratigraphy, pottery typology, scientific methods that transformed excavations into systematic studies. During the British Mandate, biblical archaeology emerged. Archaeologists like William F. Albright used the Bible as a guide to interpret their findings. His disciples, like Yigael Yadin, excavated Masada and Hazor, presenting their discoveries as proof of Israel's glory. This group was called maximalists because through their excavations, they affirmed the historical reliability of the Bible, unless proven otherwise. But between the 1960s and 1990s came the rebellion. Kathleen Kenyon's re-excavation of Jericho seemed to contradict the biblical account of Joshua's conquest. The minimalists emerged, academics like Israel Finkelstein and the Copenhagen School. They argued that the Hebrew Bible was a late construction. They dismissed the United Monarchy, the very existence of David and Solomon, as myths, citing the scant archaeological and historical evidence of both figures and of centralized states before the 9th century BCE. Today, the field seeks a middle ground. Advances like radiocarbon dating, GIS mapping, and interdisciplinary collaboration have moderated the extremes. And new discoveries like the Tel Dan Stele, which mentions the House of David, challenge minimalist skepticism. Even in relatively modern times, there have been misidentifications. In 1863, Louis Félicien de Saulcy identified the funerary complex of Queen Helena of Adiabene as the burial place of the House of David. They have since been known as the Tombs of the Kings.
Own a piece of biblical history. Carry with you the priestly blessing, the oldest biblical text ever discovered. Direct from the city of David, each purchase of its unique products directly supports the biblical archaeological excavations and discoveries in the cradle of Jerusalem. Visit store.cityofdavid.org.il and use my code CODG10001 to get your discount and help unearth biblical history.